SCP-6765 The Demon Ogier and the Bleeding Throne of Malidraug Part 1. When most people think of the SCP universe, they think of a shadowy organization operating in the modern day, hiding away statues that snap necks and homicidal reptilians. While there's nothing inaccurate about this, that's only looking at an anomalous universe through a keyhole. This is a universe filled with hundreds of thousands of years of history, and that history is just as wild, if not more so, than the present. While there's differing looks at this sort of ancient history, one of the most notable takes on it is part of the Project Paragon canon, also known as the Cactus Verse. This canon takes an approach to those ancient days that combines elements of things like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Warhammer, and also brings that history into the modern day. It's an expanding canon, and I'd highly recommend either reading the other elements of Project Paragon before this, or watching my other videos on the Cactus Verse. I'll explain some things as we go though, but this is certainly not meant to be an introduction to the material. With that, let's begin. The document begins with a directive sent by 051 to Director Shannon Lancaster, the head of Project Paragon. Project Paragon is the main focus of the Foundation's Department of Antediluvian Research, which is devoted to handling anomalies from this specific period of history. 051 congratulates Lancaster for her and her team's handling of SCP-6665, the Demon Hector and the Dread Titania, located underneath the Amazon. Moving forward, SCP-2254, the Demon Lahire, SCP-4840, the Flying City of Autopapadopolis and the Demon Lancelot, and SCP-4812, the three Great Profanities and the Fairy Princess are all going to be under Lancaster's purview. He's also trying to get SCP-2932 under Paragon as well, the prison created by the Children of the Night, SCP-1000, that is powered by the heart of the fairy goddess Titania. 051 says that there are certain groups of interest who have been following their actions here very closely, and although their disinformation teams have been working hard to mitigate their advances, they have reason to believe that there may be some who are actively attempting to undermine their efforts. That means there will be an increased security presence across all the locations within Paragon's jurisdiction going forward. He then signs the message as 051, along with his real name, Calvin Lucian. The reveal that the 051 of this canon is the same as the primary character and eventual 051 in the Ouroboros cycle is not entirely unexpected, but it is quite interesting. I'll get to a whole explanation as to why it's interesting at the end of the document, however. SCP-6765 is the group designation for a structure complex of antediluvian origin located beneath a lake in China, and several anomalous entities and artifacts contained therein. The complex, which is estimated to be over 552,000 cubic meters in volume, comprises three primary areas. The first is the atrium, accessible through a small cave network, the entrance of which is located at an outcrop into the lake. The atrium is the uppermost section of the complex, and has been mostly emptied of its original contents over the many years since the complex's lower areas were sealed. It's believed now that the atrium is the highest point of what was once a spiraling tower, essentially an attic, before the entire complex came to rest at its current position. The second main area is the throne room, located beneath the atrium down a series of staircases and behind a previously sealed doorway. This chamber is roughly 27 meters wide and 49 meters long, with a domed ceiling 11 meters high. It contains 4 other anomalies, which we'll get to, and much of the floor in this chamber has fallen away over time, exposing the third primary area underneath. This area is the reservoir, which comprises most of the remainder of the complex. It's named for its primary function within the complex, as it's filled with a significant volume of human blood. The full extent of its size is not exactly known, but initial estimations and info pointed to it containing over 790 million liters of blood, while later information points to this number being underestimated by more than 50%. A number of metallic pipelines extended down into the reservoir for the purpose of circulating blood into the extensive machine located at the center of the throne room. This machine is the throne of SCP-6765 and consists of an intricately carved stone seat with a high back. Built into it are 9 rigid metal tubes, each of which end in a long silver syringe. The tubes are positioned in order to allow them to be pushed out of the way when not in use, and then moved back into place when a subject is seated on the throne. The syringes are situated in such a way as to be inserted into a human body in 9 different locations, including various arteries and multiple parts of the heart, and it's believed that the purpose of this mechanism is to fully bypass the heart of an individual seated upon the throne, and allow the machine to push blood from the reservoir through the body. The throne is located on an isolated platform in the center of the chamber, accessible only from the back on a single narrow walkway. This platform rests on 6 large pillars that extend down into the reservoir below, and immediately underneath the platform is a large mechanical construct resembling a stylized 5-chambered heart, constructed primarily out of thin sheets of hammered gold and copper between hardened iron rods. This machine functions by pulling blood out of the individual seated upon the throne and replacing it with blood pulled from the reservoir, also serving as a way to filter the blood of contaminants before it is brought into the pumping apparatus. The exact mechanical and thaumaturgical means by which the throne accomplishes its intended design are not yet fully understood. Currently seated upon the throne is an extremely emaciated yet still living humanoid entity. Radiographic imaging of this individual confirms that the machine is bypassing their heart entirely and is still pushing blood through their body. While the individual does occasionally take shallow breaths, much of the remainder of their internal biology has ceased functioning. They no longer consume food or water, resulting in the total atrophy of their digestive system. Despite the near total collapse of many of their biological processes, though, the individual is believed to have a mostly functioning nervous system. Brain scans show no unusual activity and have confirmed that while they are not fully responsive to outside stimuli, this is because they are in fact asleep, and not a sign of nervous system failure. Another entity located in the throne room is an instance of SCP-1000, also known as Children of the Night or Bigfoot. This individual has yellow-green eyes, is roughly 3.7 meters in height, weighs 337 kilograms, and is covered head to toe in thick, dark hair. He is not hostile and displays advanced cognitive characteristics, identifying himself as Javert. Javert is incapable of direct speech, however, instead communicating either through use of American Sign Language, which he has recently learned after several sessions with a Foundation doctor, or by communicating with people that are asleep or otherwise dreaming. In this state, Javert is capable of communicating with individuals in their preferred language, though participants admit that much more of the communication is processed through sensory inputs instead of verbal dialogue. Prior to the arrival of Foundation researchers, Javert lived in the atrium of the complex, where he had assembled a small kitchen, grooming area, and sleeping mat composed of many different discarded articles of clothing, blankets, pillows, and raw cloth that he had recovered from passing caravans. Additionally, he's in possession of several radios, most of which are no longer functional, but several which have long exceeded their manufacturer's expected lifetime, seemingly due to tinkering on Javert's part. He has since moved his accommodations into the southeastern corner of the throne room, where he has continued his daily ritual of maintaining the throne itself, as well as caring for both the individual seated on the throne and the other entity in the room. This other entity is vaguely humanoid, in a state of arrested metamorphosis, and its body is composed of two distinct elements. One is a larger mass that is believed to be the intended post-morph, and a smaller human body that is the pre-morph. The larger mass consists of a misshapen torso, with 6 twisted and malformed arms, 2 limp and seemingly paralyzed legs, and a head with no mouth, no ears, no nose, and 6 eyes in 2 vertical stacks of 3. The smaller mass consists of the severely altered body of a human male who appears to be in his early 30s, with gray hair and 1 blue eye, the right eye being fully missing. The full height of the entity is roughly 10 meters, while the anticipated height of the smaller body within the larger mass is significantly smaller. This smaller mass is partially fused to the larger mass near the upper torso in a number of ways, such as the human torso conjoined to the upper section of the larger mass's chest just below the neck, the human legs found far away from the torso at the base of the larger mass's spine, fused together as if in a vestigial tail. The right arm fully encased while the left arm is exposed and fully functional. The human head is fused into the neck of the larger mass, slightly limiting the range of motion but not otherwise restricting it. The entity is capable of using all 6 of the arms on the larger mass, as well as its remaining human arm. This entity is the Demon Ogier, one of the 4 primeval demons associated with the Sky Kings of Old Europe and Apolloniana, an antediluvian kingdom of human predecessors that was fully destroyed through anomalous means between 2 and 3 decades before the Great Flood, a worldwide supernatural disaster that occurred between 4 and 500,000 years ago. As a quick recap, one of these Sky Kings sailed across the sea to conquer another land, inhabited by the Fae, taking a Fae princess as a captive. The princess, however, placed a powerful curse on the entire kingdom, eventually bringing it to ruin and transforming the 4 great knights of the house into primeval demons. These 4 were Lahire, Lancelot, Hector, and finally Ogier, who apparently was able to disrupt his transformation and halt the process. There's one more entity associated with this location, but we'll get to that one later. SCP-6765 was the subject of a decades-long investigation by members of the Site-68 Anno-Mythological Research Division into unusual phenomenon reported by travelers passing through the nearby Taklamakan Desert. Travelers had recalled seeing a Goliath in the area, or raiding traveling parties, and on several occasions, local authorities put together parties of their own to hunt down this mysterious creature. Invariably, the teams were unable to find any trace of it, leading many to resign the story to a local legend and myth. In 2016, a Foundation doctor led an expedition into the largely uninhabited Hotan County after another reported attack by a large humanoid creature. His expedition resulted in the discovery of signs of habitation in the area of the lake, eventually leading to the discovery of the complex and Javert. In his report on emerging anomalous phenomenon within the region, he describes how several members of the expedition reported meeting Javert in a dream the night before their discovery. Javert directed the expedition towards the entrance of the atrium and communicated his intent with a member of the team who was also fluent in ASL. We're next given a journal entry written by Agent Evelyn Ivy, who had previously been assigned to a team monitoring the Oneroi group of interest, a group that exists and operates within dream space. Agent Ivy was chosen from available candidates to commune with Javert due to her background in unconscious communication within metaphysical spaces. This dream occurred shortly after the discovery of the complex, but prior to the discovery of Ogier, when access to the throne room was still sealed. The entry reads, "As I gain lucidity, I realize I'm standing within a forest of tall trees. Light is visible through the canopy, and the forest floor is covered in a thick but low bed of moss and grass. As I take time to adjust and get my bearings, I see him standing nearby, at the base of one such tree. I cannot make out his appearance, but he has a calm and gentle demeanor, and this is how I perceive him. I approach and introduce myself, and he greets me warmly. I explain that I am just here to observe and understand, and he reciprocates. We begin walking through the forest. First, I ask him his name. He tells me that his people, who described themselves using a word that roughly translates to blessed children, did not use names to identify each other. He explains that by the time they had learned to communicate at all, they had long since learned to identify each other using smell and sight. He says that the eyes were closer to a name than anything spoken, and his people were able to differentiate between each other by seeing the differences between their eyes. However, he says that he has since taken the name Javert after hearing it in a radio adaptation of Les Miserables some years earlier. He asks me where I came from, and I explain that we are researchers and scientists, hoping to learn more about the world from before the flood. He tells me that a great many things have been buried over time, but that we are fortunate to have found this place. As we walk through the forest, I see shapes in the distance, dark figures with glowing yellow eyes, as if watching us. I ask what these figures are, but my guide does not answer. I ask about the structure we found him in. He acknowledges me, and then we step out of the forest and onto a high hill overlooking a sprawling city. The streets are paved with polished stone, and the buildings are constructed with a smooth red brick. At this city's heart, I see a towering spire made of black iron, stretching up into the sky. The sun streaks overhead, and I see days passing, then months. More and more of the lamplights across the city begin to go out as men, women, and children travel to the tower at the city's center. Eventually, the sun sets one last time, and never rises again. Storm clouds fill the sky. All around the city, flowers in their fields bloom and wither, and the heavens open up. It rains and rains, and the rivers spill over, and the foundations of the city begin to crack and shudder. As the waters rise, the land breaks under the stress, and the city is sundered beneath the crashing waves, all save for the single tower of black iron. An age passes, and as the waters recede, the world is changed. Mountains have been leveled, valleys rise into the sky, and the plain on which the city once sat lies deep underground, forgotten and buried. But where the tower's spire reached its peak is a dusty outcrop of rock next to a miserable patch of water. And it is to this outcrop that I am led by my companion. He stops just short of it, indicating that the entrance is through a small passageway in the rock. He resides within, he says, as does his master and the last of the great sorcerers, He bids us to come and join them in fellowship, learn what knowledge can be passed on from those whose eyes saw those ancient sunsets, and to keep this knowledge safe. His tone grows dim. A doom approaches, he says. A force is stirring that would seek to unearth those old secrets and see catastrophe brought to the world again. A raw and festering rage that cannot be easily abated. The knowledge within this cathedral, he tells me, may provide us a kind of salvation, if we are fortunate. Then he is gone. I stand alone for a time, surrounded by the ghosts of a long dead memory. The sun sets one last time, and I awaken in my tent. Javert seems to have shown her the Day of Flowers, in which a great flood summoned by a human sorcerer wiped out nearly every last remnant of antediluvian civilization. Only those that fled to high ground survived, and thus this complex, being a great tower, managed to remain somewhat intact. The mention of an approaching doom is fairly ominous, however, one that seeks to unearth old secrets and bring about more catastrophe. We're next given a transcript of a preliminary interview with Ogier, conducted by research lead Dr. Matthew Fulweiler. Fulweiler begins by introducing himself as the researcher in charge here, and Ogier responds by saying, "May the light of Asem's rising sun shine on him." He is one called Ogier, son of Osiris, once of the old land of Erikesh and of the high city of Apollyon. It has been some time since he saw the face of another man, and his presence here is dearly welcomed. Fulweiler asks him how long he has been in this chamber, and after a short pause, Ogier says that it's difficult to say. Since the start of his affliction, he need not consume food or drink, nor does he grow hungry or ravenous with thirst. Before the arrival of his caretaker, he spent many long ages here in the dark, with naught but himself and the companionship of his friend, the Lord Relevine. Relevine is the figure seated upon the throne, and Ogier says that though the ages have no doubt diminished his outward charm somewhat, Relevine was once a powerful magister of the peoples of old Malidraug, and it was he who conducted the blessed ministration that staved off Ogier's transfiguration. Without him, there would likely be little left of Ogier with whom to speak. Fulweiler asks him how he learned to speak modern English with such proficiency. Ogier says that he speaks a great many languages, and in his time he was something of a scholar among his order, and his friend and caretaker has furnished their humble residence with books in their modern tongues, as well as the listening boxes they have used to hear the voices of our people. They have had other visitors as well, those who were brave enough to seek the beckoning of his friend, the Dreamer. With little else but time and his books, he has learned many things here. Fulweiler then tells Ogier that they have found others like him, 3 of them actually, but none of them have had their faculties preserved quite as well. This gives Ogier pause, as he realizes that Fulweiler is referring to his brothers, and he asks what has become of them. Fulweiler says that they are each no longer human, but far more extreme than him. Ogier sighs and says that in his dreams he had hoped that perhaps some act of mercy from the divine would stay the fell hand of their curse, but when none of them came for him, he feared that they had been consumed. Perhaps he was the luckiest of them then. When he recognized the gnawing darkness within his spirit, he made haste from the cursed land of his sworn lord. The land of his youth, Arakesh, had long been worn down by the war engines of the Sky King and offered him no comfort, so he instead fled here to the halls of his lord Relevine, in the land of Malidraug, a Davite city-state. Fulwiler asks him what happened to him, and Ogier says that it has been such a long time, but thankfully his memories are preserved here within the pool. They are standing on hallowed ground, as this was once the tallest spire of the vein of Malidraug, the oldest and deepest sanctuary for those most ancient of artistries. This place was at one time a holy temple of the Deva, powerful ministers and sorcerers who learned how to manipulate the very blood essence of a man. It was through these sorceries that Lord Relevine preserved him, and through them that the Davites had long preserved their memory. Some of his blood, old though it may be, lies within the pool as well. He came here just before the waters rose, an event that was foreseen by a Deva oracle centuries earlier. When the skies opened and the flowers bloomed, those people came to this place, and they gave themselves into this pool. A great ministration occurred, and the blood of those people was extracted and placed here, within this temple. They still live through the throne, and their memory is preserved here, in this cathedral. Relevine was last upon the throne, and it is through him that the voices of his people flow. He is clearly lessened physically by this, and is no longer capable of maintaining little more than a deep sleep, but we can still speak to him in dreams. All of the blood in the reservoir here was given freely, as the last people above ground spoke of a wall of water higher than the mountains bearing down upon them. They sealed this chamber, and knowing that they could not be preserved with the sustenance of the body while they were entombed here, opened their hearts and emptied themselves into this temple. Ogier tells Fulwiler that he can show them his memories, if they'd like. Fulwiler says that they'll certainly want to do this, but asks if it requires one of them to sit in the chair. Ogier responds that yes, one of them will have to sit upon the throne and be deeply penetrated by the machine, as this is the only way to learn these old secrets. He then pauses and laughs, saying that it has been so long he could not help it. None other than Relevine can sit on the throne now, and removing him would likely end his life. While Relevine slumbers, however, Javert can speak with him and act as an intermediary. Fulwiler is relieved and says that they'll definitely want to do that then, and asks when Javert arrived here. Ogier isn't sure, however, and knows that they spent a long time alone here in the dark before he arrived. He has been here for some time, though, calling him his watchful protector. Fulwiler would have guessed that Ogier protects Javert, but he says that looks do deceive. Though his body is transfigured, it is not fully transformed, and much of the strength of this monstrosity is lost to him. He tires quickly, and his body aches under the effort. He was never a master of arms like the other knights, and the sorceries he can still perform leave him exhausted. He says that without Javert, he would have long ago been exposed, and perhaps even killed as an abomination. It's been lonely here, and the world of men has changed since he came to this shelter, so he's happy to help, in whatever way he still can. We're next given another dream journal entry from Agent Ivy, this time recording a shared dream between herself, Javert, Fulwiler, and Director Malthus, the head of the Foundation's Department of Antediluvian Research. The entry reads, "As I start to gain awareness, I see my own sleeping body below me, and the bodies of Director Malthus and Dr. Fulweiler. Javert sits nearby, on his bed mat. We are within SCP-6765. As he sees us waking, our host greets us warmly. 'Welcome, children of the sun,' he says. 'I pray you did not have too much trouble getting here.' He laughs at his own joke. It is quiet laughter, but it fills the room like a song. Director Malthus attempts to speak first. He struggles, as people usually do when first entering these metaphysical spaces. Javert notices this and extends a hand as if to indicate pause. 'It will take a moment for you to grow comfortable interacting with me here,' he says. 'This is not unusual. This space we are in is the space of my people, the space where our culture lives. You are just travelers in a distant land. Take some time, and you will adjust.' I speak up. 'How did you come to be here?' He speaks. 'I came here by accident. I had gotten lost and wandered into the steppe long before your brethren laid down their roads and began broadcasting on their radios. I was young, and my mother had died years before, and those few who knew of me could not find me. He pauses, 'We do not speak like you speak. Our tongues are capable of utterances, but they weren't designed to use the words of men. This is why I must use your language of hands to make myself understood when you are awake. It's only when you sleep that you can hear my voice, and when I can hear the voices of my kin as well. But there were no more children of the sun in the mountains, so I could not hear any others like me. I wandered for a time, and then found myself here. I heard the dreams of Saint Ogier and Lord Relevine, and found my way down into this place.' Dr. Fulweiler speaks next. 'How old are you?' Javert seems to reflect on this question. 'I don't know,' he says. 'I haven't thought much about it. Older than you by far. Older than most men, I would wager. Hundreds of years, maybe 1,000. Still, far younger than either of my compatriots.' 'We have seen others like you,' Director Malthus says. 'Children of the night. They looked like you, but were not like you. More primal, aggressive, dark.' Javert appears to furrow his brow. 'My mother once told me stories of our people, while we huddled atop the mountain. Stories of my forebears dancing under a red star. She told me that we were different once, urged me to make my own way in this world, a world free of darker influences. I learned to ignore the whispers of the king, where those dark influences now rest.' Dr. Fulweiler responds, 'Who is the king?' 'Ah, how to say? The king is less of a who, at least now. It is an old wisdom of my people,' Javert says. 'A place of dark secrets within our collective unconscious. There is a story, a fairy tale, that accompanies it. My people would tell this story, but my mother did not want me to hear it.' He pauses before continuing. 'As the story goes, there was once a king of night under the dark canopy of the old forest, and the king would dance to the music of a red star in the sky he could not see. When the king lay down to rest, he slipped into the slumber that would not end, and in his dreams he still danced beneath the red star. We can hear the king dancing, each of us, deep within the dark forests we walk together. It is said that if you listen to him dancing for too long, you too will begin to dance the dance of our last king of night, and those secrets our people hid away in ages past will be evident to you. He gestures to the chamber around us. The last king of night is not unlike this place, a place of stored memory. I know very little about my own people, aside from what stories they would tell on the mountain, but I could know more if I listened to the king dancing under his red star. Director Malthus finally speaks. Thank you for hosting us, Javert. There's so much I feel we can learn from you and your colleagues. Javert smiles. Yes, the Deva were many things, but perhaps more than anything they were chroniclers. There are a great many secrets hidden here, beneath the blood of Malidraug's throne. I suppose now we should wake our friends as well. He stands and turns, and as he does, the world around us changes. We are in the throne room below, but it is different. The throne is suspended over empty space, space which in the waking world is full of blood. I peer down into the darkness of this reservoir and see nothing but darkness extending below us. I hear voices echoing in the deep, soft and distant. A figure appears from the dark recesses of the throne room. He is a man, young in his face but betrayed by the age in his eyes. He is slight of build, with long black hair pulled behind his head, held in place by a silver band. He wears a simple white and blue tunic, and over it white robes trimmed in silver. He holds in one hand a wooden staff crested with a silver ornament, many delicate and interwoven circles of metal around a polished blue gem. Behind him is another figure, grotesque and horrible to behold, with 6 dull eyes. I feel nothing from this creature, but its eyes still follow us as we cross the chamber to meet him. As we approach, the man bows deeply. Greetings again. The man speaks in a tongue I do not recognize but understand immediately. I am Ogier, sworn knight of the Sky King Saurus IX von Apollyon. We greet him, and he leads us over to the edge of the precipice. We can see now, clearly, a figure seated on the throne. They are humanoid, adorned in rich red and black robes that cascade over their shoulders. I cannot tell by sight if they are man or woman. Their auburn hair, which extends past the waist, flows freely over the arms of the throne. A golden circlet rests on their head. Across their exposed chest are old scars. Their eyes are closed. Ogier steps forward from our group and kneels. Relevine, Lord of Memory, long have you dreamed idly atop Malidraug's sullen throne. I bid ye awaken, if you would. The entity on the throne twitches slightly, but their body does not move. We are transported again, with the world whirling in crimson and ebony around us. When the haze settles, we are standing atop a mountain. Below us is nothing but cloud, and above us a black sky filled with stars. The figure on the throne hangs limp in the air some distance away, one arm pulled behind their back, a symbol I recognize immediately as a show of reverence. Their form is shifting, impossible to discern. We hear a voice come from all around us. Saint Ogier, they say, my dreams of late have been troubled, but your face is one I have often thought of. It brings me a great comfort to see you, and you as well, child of the night. Ogier appears to speak, but stops as a wave of power radiates out from their body. "I know who they are, my dear saint," the voice says. "Children of Asem, of the Sun. Matthew, son of Grady. Corin, son of William. I am who was once called Relevine, the daughter and then son of Retos, and the living memory of Deva. You are most welcome here, in this last of the holy sanctuaries of my people." Dr. Fulweiler speaks. "Thank you. Our organization seeks to protect the world from powerful forces that threaten our people. There are threats that are only now becoming known to us, and we fear that our ignorance will blind us to these dangers. From around us, the clouds begin to part. Spires and columns of white marble rise from the mist. Towering cathedrals and temples built to long-dead gods. Pale figures made of smoke, faceless and unmoving, stand and stare into the distance, where a single point of golden light reaches into the sky. The heavens fold and split, and a burning star begins to descend. The voice speaks, but it is no longer a unified voice. Different tones can be heard through a chorus of individuals, some distinct and others faint and wavering. Child of the sun, what wonders we have beheld. I have seen the dawn of civilizations who, in their time, became little more than a memory, and have long since passed beyond the veil of what is known. I have watched the skies fall, and watched the seas rise to meet them. I have witnessed the ineffable beauty of truth in this world, and known the uncanny horror that follows. I have known. I have forgotten. I have known again. The voices become quiet as the star continues to fall. The golden point of light rises, outstretched to meet it. The voice speaks again, once more together. Once our people relied on divinity to hold the knowledge we treasured so dearly. Our divine ancestry betrayed us, just as your forefathers betrayed you. Our people resolved then to never forget again. This place, this bastion, we have filled it with the memory of this world. Secrets that no library can hold. Dreams that once lingered in the waters of that which is not. The star falls into the golden embrace of the light in the distance. A great wind blows through the city of smoke around us, and the great structures fall back into the darkness below. A moment later, the world is still. The point of golden light hangs for a moment longer before vanishing. The figure appears again, hanging in the air before us. Their voice speaks once more. You were not wrong to fear those horrors of the old world, child of the sun. A great many cruel things were buried in ages long past by those who came before even we, the chroniclers. Those who have emerged into your world seek vengeance for the atrocities of your ancestors. Their power is terrible, and their intentions cruel, but they are limited by the hate of those who called them out from the shadow. Those whose tombs lie even deeper in the earth have no such limitations. The sacrifice of our people will have been for nothing if our knowledge lies stagnant in this deepening pool until the world turns over. We will offer you the wisdom we have collected, children of Asem. But know this, even here, there is knowledge that ought not be known by men. Tread carefully in these scarlet halls. The world fades to black. I am alone in the dark until I slip from unconsciousness. Afterwards, Director Malthus and Dr. Fulweiler got onto a conference call with Director Lancaster to inform her of their progress. Malthus says that their initial trials have shown a lot of success, and the agents they've pulled from the Oneroid teams have made great strides in their ability to transcribe what they're experiencing in the dream state in real time. They're hoping that some new neural implants will expedite the process, however, allowing them to capture information directly from the dreams. They're also no longer limited to individual participants either, as last night they had 4 agents interacting with the entity in the dream state simultaneously. Lancaster asks him if he thinks they're getting facts from this thing, or just mad ramblings. Malthus says that it's impossible to know for sure, but between Relevine and Ogier, they've been able to verify that they know things that the Foundation already knows. Ogier has given them a somewhat detailed account of Apollyonan history, much which matches records they've recorded elsewhere. Relevine has other accounts available that generally match what they're familiar with, and it's not just a single source either, as their agents describe it as having audience with different individuals, or groups of persons sharing memories. The stories they're able to recount are extremely specific, and consistent across retellings. Malthus admits that, while it would be difficult to maintain that kind of consistency through so many narratives, it's not impossible. Lancaster then asks Fulweiler what his take on it is, to which he says that he believes this is the next step in their understanding of the old world. They now have access to a library of knowledge from generations of Davites, information that they wouldn't have had even if they'd written down as much as they could have within their lives, and then kept it perfectly preserved. He thinks that they need to pull as much information out of this place as they can before Relevine becomes incapable of operating the throne he's sitting on. Lancaster laughs and says that Relevine has been sitting there for thousands of years, so why would he keel over anytime soon? Fulweiler responds that it's not his age that they're worried about, as the arcana they used to build the throne is extremely impressive. Aside from the breakdown of his major organ functions that he no longer needs, he's remarkably healthy, and his brain is still in great condition given the circumstances. The issue is with the memories themselves. Ogier brought it up first, that interacting with Relevine has become more difficult over time, and he thinks that Relevine is ill. They haven't found any pathogens in the samples they've taken, but another doctor thinks that it's something to do with the super consciousness within the blood itself that's causing this sort of fog. Javert has described it as pressure that has gotten worse recently. Agent Ivy apparently tried to bring up this issue to Relevine directly in a dream state, but she found herself unable to get the words out at all. She didn't feel this when discussing anything else, so it points to something selective happening. Fulweiler speculates that Relevine is aware that something is wrong, but isn't willing or interested in speaking about it. They don't believe that this is going to affect their work in the short term, though, as everything is proceeding as planned for now. They have teams mapping as much of the complex as they can in the meantime, and even though most of the lower areas of the complex are flooded with blood, seismological surveys show several large pockets of empty space down there. Javert thinks that there may be a way to access those areas through ducts in the walls that were used for waste. Lancaster tells them to keep her in the loop about anything they're able to garner from this that they feel needs to be addressed, and she'll go poke Kane about getting those neural implants for them. That brings us to the meat of the document, a collection of transcripts of various dreams that the agents have had which have been classified as of major importance. These narratives are generally accounts or records of events that took place during the period in Antediluvian history wherein the Davite people were active and are of significant import to the greater concerns of Project Paragon and the SCP Foundation as a whole. In other words, be prepared for a whole lot of lore. I'll be reading all of these transcripts verbatim. An account of Ogier, son of Osiris, also called Saint Ogier. Narrative collected by Agent Evelyn Ivy. A short account of my life, as I can recall it, and how I came into the service of Saurus the Ninth. In my youth, I was a student of the teacher Yu Lang of Arakesh, a scholar of some renown who had learned himself under the tutelage of the old master Orang Bor the Easterman. Our studies were of the sun, and of Asem's lingering light in this world. Our oldest legends told of how Asem was himself broken, and his remains scattered across the world, and yet some still claimed authority by the might of his divinity. How could this be? Our divine ancestor had been sundered, but the power these individuals wielded was no less potent. It was for this reason we studied, and in our studies we grew closer to the truth. Our study of the lingering light was considered heretical, though, to the minds of the cult of Edis, those who lived in Apollyon and worshipped the heritage of the Sky Kings. Their army of inquisitors came into the lands of Arakesh through Ulem, whose governor had betrayed us to the enemy. At the head of their column was the dogma lord Vermeer, most reviled of the cult's clergymen. We were forced to flee, first to the east, into the old lands of Nod. But we were pursued, past the old citadel of Enoch and towards the sea. Master Orang Bor died on the march, his old body broken in the effort, and his bones crumbling to dust. We held up in a small enclave by the sea for 2 years, protected only by our faith and the wretched weather, all while Vermeer's jaws closed around us. Then, in the 3rd year of our despair, the deep men of Meru within the hollow earth came out of the east to do battle with the Inquisitors. They came upon great moles and worms, and in front of them they drove the many blind creatures of the darkness. The siege was broken, and we hastened to flee, taking the coast road to the west and away from the battle. But our advance was halted by another army, greater even than that of the Lord Vermeer, a host of Apollyonian lancers, and the great terror himself, Lancelot, riding to reinforce the army of Inquisitors. With him was the Sky Princeps Saurus the Ninth, himself only barely older than a boy like I. We stood little chance. The teachers who tried to defend us were killed, my teacher Yu Lang among them. The rest of us were taken captive, and watched as the knight Lancelot rode down every last of the deep men at Brooding Nell, and lashed their commanders to the rock of Necrox, to be disassembled by the sea. Lancelot had little interest in religious differences, and sought to leave those of us who remained within the borders of Arakesh. Vermeer insisted, though, demanding to let his church have their sacrifices. Lancelot relented, apathetic to any issue that did not carry a sword. On the 16th night of our march towards Europe, a terrible storm swept in from the sea, with winds that screamed and howled and tore up the tents and sent the great horses fleeing. Lancelot demanded Vermeer impose his will against the storm and protect the camp, but the sorcery of Edis's cult was suspect, and Vermeer faltered and failed. When the encampment began to riot and panic, I feared for my life and prayed for salvation. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I knew true faith. There was nothing else left. The lingering light came out from within me like a tempest, and the winds and the rains were driven back. The next day I was taken from the rest of my peers and brought into audience with Lord Lancelot, who saw that I was protected from the Inquisitors, and from Vermeer specifically, who sought my repentance after humiliating him the night before. Upon my return to the capital, I was given provisions and resources to continue the work of the scholars of Arrakesh, free from the struggles that pervaded our life on the frontier. In this atmosphere, I was able to learn greater truths of Asem's lingering light, and the remnants of old Aud that were ancient even then. In the 87th year of Lord Saurus's reign, I was knighted, and was given the title Knight of Faith when Lord Hector saw fit to raise me into the Order of the King's Protectors. I was the last of the knights to be given that honor, along with Lord Hector, Lord Lancelot, and Lord Lahire. When, during his campaign across the sea, our King Saurus VIII was killed, my service passed to his son, Saurus IX, who was called the Sunset King. While it was his father who brought the hatred of the fair folk to our lands from across the sea, it was his own doing that let that poison fester and grow until it caused the very earth below us to swell and buckle. An account of Ramian the Chronicler, narrative collected by Agent Dane Norcross. An account of the heroes of Deva, from the memory of Ramian the Chronicler, a humble servant of Relevine, lord of the house of Malidraug, and his father Retos before him. In those days there were many storytellers by the highways who carried with them tales of great heroes and champions from distant lands. Within the lands of the Deva, these stories often came with tales of great victories over terrible foes, or incredible achievements. In olden times, they often were associated with blessings from the King in Red himself, or another occupant of Asem's court. As time passed, and our reliance on that ancient divinity receded, these heroes became champions of their own great will, or the will of the living memory itself. First among the heroes of Deva was Alanadar, who was called the Wind Seeker. Alanadar is said to have journeyed to Nol Julan at the convergence of the great winds, and learned many great truths from the stone men who lived there. The first of the great Deva warriors was Seskeras, who is said to have served at the right hand of the King in Red himself during the years of his divinity, and who brought low the giant of Allah, and built the citadel of Akamana in the north from its skull. Then there is the hero Simon, who is called the Necromancer. She was said to have bandied with death itself to raise an army in the defense of the village of Hul in the east when it was threatened by a group of Eclipsian mercenaries. Despite the grim taboo of her actions, Simon was able to save her people and protect their homes, but at the cost of her dignity. Grateful though they were to her for preserving their lives, her neighbors drove her out and into the frozen plains of Opanskaye, past the edge of the world, where it is said she spent the rest of her life battling great wolves and nighthawks until the day she died. There are even some tellings wherein Simon resurrected herself after death, and continues to fight off the terrors that lurk in the foundations of the earth to this day. No greater a hero is named in our legends, though, than Beowulf, son of Bremen, the last king of Nod. When the lands of his forefathers came to despair, he pledged his loyalty to the living memory and accepted it into himself. He was thereafter called the Blood Wolf, and it was by his hand that the Apollonian warrior Hasgarul was laid low at the Battle of the Cimmerian Pass. He fought with a great cutter, the size of a man and edged like the teeth of a terrible beast, and for nearly a century did he defend Deva and its western neighbors from the approach of the Sky Kings of Europe, even defending the citadel at Herat from the dreaded Lancelot for 13 months, giving the common people there time to escape to the south. In his final years, Beowulf came into the service of Relevine of Malidraug and fought alongside the deep men of Agartha near Tripura against the Sky King's ships from Jershon and the Vales of Har. It was after many great battles that his lord called him away, and the two of them journeyed to the north. Never again was the hero Beowulf ever seen, nor did Lord Relevine ever speak to his whereabouts. But those in the Lord's court did note a deep sadness upon his return that lingered over him afterwards until the day the waters fell over the mountains. An account of Ramian the Chronicler, servant to the House of Malidraug. Narrative collected by Agent Dane Norcross. An account of the fabled champion of Abaddon. From the memory of Ramian the Chronicler, a humble servant of Relevine, lord of the House of Malidraug, and his father Retos before him. Other stories were told, however, of heroes beyond the borders of Deva. In the great long ago, merchants from beyond the sea in the land of Punt told of the champion of Abaddon, the land of the tall men, and of the shifting sands. It is said that a great bat appeared in the lands of Abaddon from some great pit in the heart of the desert. The eyes of the creature could fill the heart of a man with mortal fear, and its shrieks would drive him to madness. As the story went, simply passing over a town in the night was enough to make unborn babes spoil in their mothers' bellies and emerge misshapen and vile. This bat they called Strollgront, the king of devils. So it was that a champion emerged from those peoples, who journeyed across the blasted terra incognita towards the place where the old star fell in ancient times, where it was known that Strollgront slumbered in the day. This champion waited until dusk settled over the great crags of that place, and as the beast took flight from its lair, they struck it down from the sky with a great stone spear. The two locked in dire combat, each battling for their lives. While the eyes of the beast were horrible to behold, the champion did not flinch, and while its terrible voice rang freely in the night, the champion did not flee. By the time the sun rose on the following day, the great bat was dead upon the ground, and the champion stood victorious. When the time came for the tall men to praise their great savior, they found that the champion was blind and deaf, rendering the beast's eyes and voice powerless against them. Thereafter was it said that this unnamed champion was the first noble lord of Abaddon and the shifting sands. In the language of those people, the champion was called the Sroll of Az-Zadan, meaning king of the hot country. Every lord of those nomadic peoples took the name Sroll in honor of the blind champion, and the most pious of the desert kings were said to blind and deafen themselves out of reverence. An account of Ramian the Chronicler, servant to the House of Malidraug. Narrative collected by Agent Dane Norcross. An account of the 4 knights of House Apollyon. From the memory of Ramian the Chronicler, a humble servant of Relevine, lord of the House of Malidraug, and his father Retos before him. In the lands of Europe, the acknowledgement of heroes was strictly forbidden. Those who accomplished great things or achieved great victory were ordained by official decree to accredit their deeds to their king, and for this reason, many of the most well-known stories of those people were attributed to a servant of the Sky King, with the implication that it was by the Sky King's authority that the acts were even made possible. The single exception to this was the case of the 4 knights of that country, who in its final years became well-known icons of Apollonian authority, despite the dogmatic resistance to their status by the cult of Edis. The Lord Ogier was the youngest of King Sarus' knights by far, but is said to have had a keen mastery over the dying light of Assem which lingered in the lands in those days. Being less an accomplished warrior and less capable in any variety of swordcraft, the one called Saint Ogier instead called upon a belief in a long-dead god to do great works. His presence within the royal quarters began a decade-long theological crisis within Europe, as adherents to the state cult adamantly and at times violently admonished any authority that was not derived from the innate divinity of the Sky Kings. Despite this, Ogier's disciples became widespread, each seeking knowledge and understanding that would guide them towards the greater truths of this lingering light. The Lord Lahire was called the greatest swordsman who ever lived. He was a known braggart, and it was well understood that many of the legends and myths attributed to the warrior called the Fell Blade of Apollyon were penned by Lahire himself. Despite his outspoken bravado and aggressive self-importance, Lahire's actions often lived up to his claims about his own capabilities. He was a distant cousin to the Sky King Sarus VIII, and his near-royal upbringing had seen him trained in the arts of swordcraft by masters from as far away as Leng and Lucamore in the far northeast. As accomplished as he was with his famous curved blade in hand, Lahire was perhaps more well known for his promiscuity. Notably beautiful to behold, Lahire had no shortage of lovers. It was often remarked that the Lord's blade has slayed 10,000 men, and laid 10,000 more. The Lord Lancelot was a fearsome warlord. His origins were never known, but to the Deva he was called the Scourge of Memory. It was said that after he would break a man with his terrible black mace, he would drink their blood and consume their memories. While much of Lord Lancelot's legend is a result of his ferocity on the field of battle and his ruthless oppression of the Deva hinterlands in the west, it is likely greatly hyperbolized. In truth, Lancelot was a shrewd, albeit brutal, commander and tactician. His personal division, the Shatterchrist, were well known for an almost unbroken string of victories in the Middle South. Lancelot's armies were themselves responsible for the single greatest acquisition of land in 1,000 years, conquering all the nations between Eden and Jershon, and delivering them to the Sky King Sarus VIII as a wedding gift, when the king took 3 of Lancelot's sisters into his consortium. The Lord Hector was called the greatest of the knights of House Apollyon. He was the king's personal shield, and wherever Sarus VIII went, Hector followed as his stalwart protector. The conquests and tyranny of the Sky King had created no small measure of resentment and no small number of enemies. There was a measure of safety within the walls of High Apollyana, but any time the Sky King sought to venture out into the world beyond his citadel, he was at risk. Despite this, his life was never in danger. Whether it was by divine inspiration or sheer force of will, Lord Hector never failed to intercept a would-be attempt on the life of his liege lord. It was for this reason that when Sarus VIII took his armies across the western sea to ravage the distant lands of the fair folk, Hector was by his side. At the height of the greatest battle of that campaign, Hector personally slew a fairy champion who had dared to challenge the Sky King to single combat. It was Hector who, at his lord's command, wrapped a fey princess in iron chains and dragged her back to the king's flagship. When her curse upon the Sky King set his fleet alight and sent him falling into the depths of the dark ocean, it was Hector who dove into the maelstrom to save him. Perhaps Hector would have followed Sarus into that inky void, had it not been for Lancelot and Lahire, who pulled him out of the sea when the king was too far gone to save. An account of Javert, Child of Night. Narrative collected by Agent Maria St. John. The sun is gone. Black clouds roil and rage overhead as lightning leaps between them and water cascades down from the sky. A dull green glow illuminates a towering, branching shape in the distance. A low moan of something far away, calling out in warning. The earth below shudders and shakes. Long lines of figures, eyes glowing in the darkness, solemnly march towards the light. The river swells and overruns its banks, and hundreds are swept away into the rising water. The chattering and crying echoes throughout the forests. I am lifted off the ground, held by my mother. She turns her body to shield me from something I hear before I see, but as we fall to the ground, it comes fully into view. A monstrosity, shambling and shaking, tears over a hilltop nearby. In the dark of the storm, it is little more than a colossal mass of arms thrashing through the lines of my kin. In one of its many hands, I see the shine of metal, a rod, long as a tree is tall, with a jagged point at its end. As it passes over us, I catch a glimpse of its eyes, 6 of them, blood and fire falling from them like the rain all around us. It does not look back at me. It does not look at the ground beneath its own feet. It stares unwaveringly forward, towards the green light. In a moment, it is gone, thundering forward with terrible purpose. My mother pulls me into her again, and the world goes dark. I hear the wailing of my kin, the groan of their goddess, the screams of the demon, and then nothing. An account of Wereblith of Dai, who was in Ys when the curse befell the servants of the Sky King. Narrative collected by Agent Evelyn Ivy. It were with mine own eyes did I witness what befell the Lord's blade Lahire. On the eve of his destruct, did he give a great and terrible moan and slither out from his manor house a truly wretched thing. His body were deformed in miserable shape, and his member was become swollen and pustulous. But even in his throes of agony, as his form were altered, did he feel the terrible lust of his curse, and he began a terrible rape of the town of Ys. Passed he did over that city in a terrible heat, and the ferocity of his mindless desire were enough to cause a man to burst. As he were as a knight, his sword was swift, and drive it through those poor souls he did, until none were left who he had not desecrated in this foul way. He lingered there for a time, and watched it I from the hillside a distance away at the home of Everild, my friend and confidant, who himself had fled. In 3 days did the Lord's armies descend on Ys and lay siege to the thing what was once Lahire, but now were truly consumed by the demon. They struck the beast with a great number of arrow, and poured fire upon it from a distance. Though it did try to come upon them from its lust, it were pushed away by the heat of the flame and the sting of iron, and driven into the sea. The Lord's blade called out a final time in wretched misery, and then sank beneath the waves, and weren't seen in the lands of the Sky King ever again. An account of Ogier, son of Osiris, also called Saint Ogier. Narrative collected by Agent Evelyn Ivy. An account of my transformation, and the defilement of my body by the curse laid on the house of Apollyon. We had heard the utterance of the curse of that fey princess, each of us. The Lord Hector had called us together to discuss the voice we had each felt in our waking minds. I expressed my uncertainty. We truly knew so little about the magics of the Fae, but the Lord Lancelot dismissed these concerns. If they had magic so terrible as to threaten the dominion of the Sky King, then why did it not manifest as their forests burned? Where were those curses when their citadels and the trees were torn down and their soldiers butchered? There was truth in what he said, but still her words lingered uncomfortably in my heart. I remember them clearly. Usurpers of the sun's right hand, of fell deeds and false promises. You will have the years to count your graven sins, but no mind to resolve them, and no soul to be absolved. It was just days later that I was set upon by the demon. As I slept, I beheld a strange sight. I was spread out beneath a sky full of stars, immobilized. Above me were 2 towers of great eyes, 3 on each side, and below was a stone plinth inscribed with a runic text. I felt a terrible cold then, one that swept up from my feet and gripped my heart, and in that moment I knew true fear, imminent and overwhelming. I heard the voice of an entity from behind the plinth, at times both menacing and sympathetic. It spoke to me in words I understood innately, but could not repeat. It told me that I was to become a curse, not just on the world of men, but on myself as well, for the many sins I had committed. I tried to appeal to my own defense, but the words caught in my throat and withered. Then I heard another voice, soft and distant, as if buried deep below me, whispering a plea to this dark totem. This voice begged that I be consumed, fully and intimately, by solemn despair, that I be given entirely to an unending grief that has no limit, no reprieve, and no end. As the voice continued to plead for my damnation, there came cracks in the plinth that shined with dim starlight, and the plinth shattered. From within I heard a third voice, a voice I knew was the despair with which I would be cursed. It said simply, "It will be." I awoke suddenly, and knew with my whole soul that I was losing control. My body felt unfamiliar to me, alien and malicious. I stumbled from my home within Apollyon as a grim moon hung overhead. I fled, as fast as my feet could carry me, guided by the lingering light to which I had always held faith. I heard screams in the capital that night. It would not be until later that I learned that they were from those poor souls who had encountered Lancelot, cursed as he was, and were butchered by the thing he had become. I thought to seek out my Lord Hector, but knew in my soul that there was no salve in the world of men that could cure this grim ailment. I fled, far away from my home, to the lands of my youth, to Arrakesh. It was there I was discovered by the Deva of Malidraug, who had heard tell of the lamentations of Apollyon, and set a watch on their border to defend against the horrors that might spill out from there. Even as wretched as I had become, they found pity for me, and brought me to this citadel and into the comfort of Lord Relevine. He performed a ministration then, one that I fear may have accelerated his own decline, but one that no doubt saved my soul. I was left half-turned, the abomination I was cursed to become little more than a malignancy upon my back, but in control of my faculties and aware of myself. While my Lord Relevine's ministration has caused me a reprieve from the demon whose skin I share, I remain maligned by the curse. When I sleep, I see the towers of eyes. When there is silence, I hear the whispering of that pleading voice, begging for restitution, for vengeance, for wrath. An account of Aldwyn, daughter of Aelred, a Davite mystic and divinist. Narrative collected by Agent Jaren Caspian. In the many nations within the realms of men were worshipped a great many gods, both greater and lesser, many of whom were known and recognized to have true power over mankind and the lands beyond. In life, I studied the practice and practitioners of their worship, and took great care to preserve this knowledge within the living memory. In the lands of Europe, a tradition was once passed down of the formless nothing and the two siblings who inhabited it, Is and Is Not. These were said to be the originators, the essence of both everything and nothing, in perfect unison with each other. Their children, the ones who shaped the universe and built the very gods themselves, were called Paragons. Little is known of this tradition now, aside from one I will name later, while there is evidence that this pantheon was more well understood during the days of the old King Edis. The imperial cult that carried his name would eventually supplant all other belief systems within Apollyon's dominion, and much of that knowledge was lost or destroyed for being heretical to the cult's dogma. Perhaps the oldest and most well-regarded of the gods worshipped by men throughout the world was Gaia, the Earth Mother. While many who walked upon her face paid service to gods both greater and lesser who would grant them power, almost all peoples recognized the bounties of the earth and the life that she sustained. In Leng, far to the north, it was said that Earth Mother had made herself from shapeless ash and given a home and a blessing to her children within the formless void. Gaia was said to be the mother of the earth and seas, sister to Luna the moon, and in some tellings, consort to the sun itself. While many gods were known to walk along the byways in the realms of men, Gaia was notably never said to have been seen by any person, as her presence was, in truth, felt by men and beasts at all times, below and around them. Within the great kingdoms of the old world was known the legend of the great city of Aud, called Autopapadopolis, or the first city of men. As the stories go, it was in this golden city that our forebears walked alongside the lesser primordial gods, sometimes called the young gods, beings of divine origin that were no less godlike from the perspective of mere men, but whose scope was surpassed by their divine ancestry. The architects of that city were the two gods most associated with the formation of man from the dirt of Gaia's earth, the god Mechane and the goddess Vazjuma. Mechane was a god of order, of structure, of the human desire to see patterns and understand the design of all things. He was said to be an architect, an engineer, a god of form and metal. Mechane saw the gifts of the mother Gaia and desired above all else to give it direction. When the first man was crafted out of the shapeless clay, Mechane was the one who built his mind and gave him will. Vazjuma was Mechane's sister, the wild goddess of impulse. She saw the bounty of the world and wished to fill it with wild abandon, letting nothing impede her vision but her own imagination. It was her hands that shaped the first man, stitched the tapestry of his skin, and filled him with blood and heat. Vazjuma was sometimes called the Mother of Wombs, and it was often said that the first man grew within her for 1,000 years before she experienced the first childbirth. Within the lands of Europe, the cult of Edis maintained the supposed divinity of the Sky Kings, and while it was commonly accepted outside of that country that the imperial cult was simply an engine of propaganda, there was some indirect truth to their claims. The Sky Kings, since before written history, each wore the iron crown of their fathers, an iron crown said to have once sat on the head of Sem, the first man. The legends of the first man are little more than an oral tradition, passed down through countless generations between the destruction of Papadopoulos and the Great Flood. Sem is said to have been sculpted out of Gaia's rich earth around Mekhane's iron frame and covered in a blanket of Azjuma's flesh. He was given a great dominion over the world, or rather, the world beyond the shores of the dark forests of the fair folk. It was said that the golden light that was nested within him outshone even the sun in the sky, and the gods of the earth and the heavens. He was named Adam el Asem, or First of That Which Is. The Sky Kings derived their divinity from Asem, and it was through their claim of divine ancestry that they did commit a great many terrible acts against their fellow man. However, this acknowledgement of their heritage was at odds with the official dogma of the late imperial cult. Asem was regarded as an ancient king of men, and many knew that the Iron Crown was Asem's crown, but his own divinity was often excluded from the state religion due to how it might diminish the claimed inherent divinity of the House of Apollyon. In some tellings, it was even stated plainly that the oldest ancestor of that great house, Harion the hero, won the Iron Crown when he killed Asem with his own hand. A ludicrous claim, as more than 5,000 years separated the doom of Papadopoulos and the birth of old Harion. There were, of course, others who were known to have walked the streets of Odd alongside Asem and the young gods. While not spoken of with the same reverence, it is generally recognized that the goddess of starlight, Ea, spent time in the court of Papadopoulos. This goddess was later called Titania by men, and was most beloved among the fair folk in the shaded lands across the Western Sea. The god Dirch was revered among those people who lived in Yin in the distant east. Dirch was said to sleep beneath the deep sea, and the waves from the ocean were the result of his slow breathing. Dirch was almost always depicted as a great and terrible crustacean who had once come ashore in the form of a man to take a human wife with him back to his home beneath the water. The old dragons were said to worship a flaming god who gifted Asem with fire, but without a written memory, any record of this being's name or identity has long been lost. Within Deva, no god was spoken of with more fear than our divine ancestor, the King in Red, who was called the Lord of Memory, or the Bleeding Monarch among our people. The King in Red was said to have taken counsel in Papadopoulos before its fall, and inked the first chronicle of the Deva, the Codex Archaic, in his own blood. Many of the queens of the Deva and the kings of Malidraug claimed direct lineage from the King in Red, and it was commonly accepted, albeit unlikely, that the great royal houses of Deva were those with the closest direct link to the King in Red. But our relationship with our divine ancestor was not one of reverence. In the written history of our people, the Queen Kinawise of Azadahaka grew to love another entity of the ancient world, one that is presumed to have predated even the gods. the divine paragon of all knowledge, who was called the Serpent. A new cult sprang from her governorship of Azadahaka, the many hands of the Serpent, who above all else coveted the pursuit of knowledge over memory. This began a paradigm shift within the established order of the Deva, as the old tenets of sacred remembrance were thought by many to have been supplanted by a lust for new wisdom. So it was that the King in Red writhed with jealousy and fear over being replaced, demanding the undiluted worship of the Deva for himself alone. For 3 long months, blood rained from the sky over Azadahaka, and the spirit of the King in Red, whose physical form had long since left for his sullen halls deep below the earth, came into the dominion of the Queen Kinawise as a terrible plague. For each new horror, though, the Deva of Azadahaka responded with wisdom gained through communion with the Serpent, and each new horror was rebuffed. When it was clear that those people would not be so easily admonished for their supposed sin, the King in Red himself appeared in his wretched glory from down below to break the lands of Azadahaka as a punishment for the crimes of its monarch and the heresy of its populace. From his blasphemed throne, deep below the earth, he brought forth into the world a host of ancient nightmares, lost even to memory, and loosed them upon his people. To his side he called 7 fell lieutenants, his brides, the maidens of agony, and commissioned them to bring ruin upon the world. In despair, the Queen Kinawise cried out for aid and was answered by 3 great sovereigns of the Deva: Raifnild, the Sunrise Queen of Ashma, Empress Agatha of Greater Jahi, and Moros, who was called the Mad King of Malidraug. There was a great struggle on the slopes of the great mountain fortress of Zahak, where all the rage and putrescence of the god of blood and memory was laid bare to the world, and the battle would last the life of an entire generation. In that long battle, the Sunrise Queen was destroyed, as was her daughter, Raifleen, but a champion of Jahi named Stella the Sanctified load the King in Red with a hammer strike, and the Mad King placed upon him a terrible enchantment, binding him once more into the bowels of the earth. As he fell, the King in Red cursed the name of those who walk upon Gaia's bounty, and swore that once his brides were born again, and his 7 sons were seeded into the world, he would have his final cruelty against us all. An account of Petrus the Scribe, Deva archivist assigned to the governor of Cana. Narrative collected by Agent Armin Khachaturian. I am standing in a group of people beneath a cliffside. Beyond the shelter provided by the rock face, a fierce storm rages. The sky is dark, the only light coming from bolts of lightning that briefly illuminate a mountainous countryside. Next to me is Rolfel, the governor's prefect in Cameria, where we are traveling. We are a week's hard ride from Cana in the east, having fled from Ukbar in Europe when the garrison there seized control of the city 2 weeks prior. Another stake of lightning. One of our group screams, pointing skyward. Above us we see a shape moving against the roiling skies, something not of this world. The sky brightens again, only for a moment, and I see segmented legs, chattering claws, and shining armor. A terrible cacophony raises above the roar of the storm, the sound of a multitude of voices crying out in unison. One of our own names this creature, the Lord of Faces. It circles overhead slowly, The slow beat of its enormous wings spraying us with water mixed with a miasma from the creature's flesh. I hear the cries of individuals through the nightmarish dissonance. They are agonized, begging, pleading. They want to die. They are not permitted to die. They are held there, unable to do little more than suffer and scream. I cover my eyes, but the sound cuts through my palms. I hear nothing but a choir of damned souls bleeding into the very essence of my body. One of our group panics and flees. With a rush of air and the terrible grinding of claws and chitin, they are picked from the ground. Their voice joins the others. Then, another sound, a single voice, distantly human, but no less terrible than the choir of the flying nightmare. As lightning cuts across the sky once more, I see it coming over the mountaintop. A colossus. Fire and smoke pours from its eyes, of which there were 6, and it scaled the mountainside like a dreadful insect crawling on 6 arms. At the end of 2, the wrists terminate in spiked mounds which sunder the earth beneath them with every great crash against it. As it comes into view of our meager shelter, it raises up on 2 legs, and we see fully the extent of its enormous size. Its body is like a man, but grossly misshapen and twisted. It bellows, not from an open mouth, but from somewhere else. From great fissures in its chest, more smoke and fire leaps forth, and the heat of its rage turns the rain in the sky to steam. I hear another of our group cry out, "What is that?" The prefect Rolfel responds, "It is the Lord Lancelot, cursed though he is. It can be no other." Suddenly there is another rush of air. The legion of screaming echoes across the range, and the flying nightmare descends towards the thing that once was the Lord's iron hand. It lands, and now it too is fully illuminated, like a spider, with great leathery wings and a rattling tail that ends in a terrible barbed spike. The light shines off its armor, which reflects the valley around us, and beyond the mirror of its plate I can see writhing faces, desperate and horrid. The creature raises up its 2 great claws towards the heavens, and the shrieks become louder even than they were before. We are reduced, all of us, to wriggling flesh things, naked and impotent before a dark god. And then it is cast aside. There is the sound of a hammer falling on cold iron, and the creature is tossed into the mountainside as one of the demon's spiked hands is brought to bear against its shining armor. The terrible spider screams, not with the voices held captive within itself, but with its own voice, alien and pitiful, like the whine of a beast. The demon turns towards where the spider has fallen, and the flesh over the demon's spine tears free. A plume of flame erupts from within as it is propelled across the valley with uncanny speed. Through the din of this clash, I hear it speak, not in a tongue I know, but with words I recognize nonetheless. Loathsome insect, wretched fey, what have you done to me? The demon is now a pillar of fire, even as the chattering spider drives its spike through his neck. Blood floods the valley below, and smoke pours from the wound, but the demon is undeterred. Wrath you prescribe to me, man's inherent hatred. Very well, I shall acquiesce. You will have my wrath, insect, until nothing of me remains. We huddle beneath the cliff for what feels like days, until at last the sound of their horrible conflict fades into the distance, little more than thunder on the horizon. We flee, few of us though remain. Neither the demon that was once called Lancelot, or the great and miserable spider, are ever seen again in the lands east of Europe. An account of Arvadicus the Explorer, chronicler of the Deva. These are the words of Arvadicus, son of Mang and Neandra, who was called the Explorer in those ancient times, and who kept a great many records of the happenings within Europe during my time traveling that land. In the final years of the House of Apollyon, I was a guest at the convent of my friend the Primera Fioria, who allowed me to stay in her estate while I assembled my chronicle. The first of the great calamities that befell the old House of Apollyon came before its doom was sealed. Cyrus VIII von Apollyon, the last of the great kings, met his end upon the western sea as his armies returned from their conquest of the fairies. Dragged into the deepening wake, his own iron chains bound upon him, he was consigned to the great dark of that ocean, never again to draw breath in this world. But his lieutenants, the knights Lancelot, Hector, Lahire, and Ogier, did return from that distant land, and with them the treasure their king had taken as his prize. A fairy princess, the daughter of some regal body, now shattered and broken beneath the weight of Apollyon's war machine. Though it burned her flesh, they bound her in black iron within a pine box, and muffled her screams with wool and wheat stalk. She was delivered, wretched a thing as she had become, to the Sky King Cyrus IX, Lord of heaven and earth, inheritor of Asem's iron crown. It is said that the torment that Cyrus IX inflicted upon the fairy princess was the most wicked this world had ever known. Cruelty without measure, without reprieve, and for what? Because her people had resisted their invaders? Because she had set alight the vessel of the man who had crushed her kinfolk's skulls beneath his boot? Or was it because of a greater slight, one that has always existed within the hearts of men? A grand dispassion against the fair folk for that old sin, the crime they had committed against the first man. What motive had he for this terrible oppression is lost to time, but those in the court of the Sky King note that, if nothing else, the princess knew true suffering in those days. When his fetid vengeance had been wrought against her and not broken her will, Cyrus IX, refusing to acknowledge his own impotence, had a grim burial place dug for her. Deep into the earth, down where the miasma of sorrow and despair mixes with the dark things of this world, he had placed an iron sarcophagus within a stone crypt. When the time came for the princess to be laid in this miserable place, the wretched hierophants of the cult of Edis took what little dignity she had reserved, filling her with preserving balms, and then sealed her in that sullen place. Her tomb was buried, and it was ordained that never again would she see the light of day. In that dark place, the princess uttered a curse, ancient and forsaken, against all mankind. Deeper even than she, at the bottom of the world, 3 horrors of the old world answered her call. The first of the Lord Knights to fall was Lahire, who was called the Lord's Blade. It is said he became a writhing, horrible thing before he disappeared into the sea and was lost. Next was the Lord Lancelot, the Great Terror, who was changed into something wholly awful and ruinous, breaching the very walls of Hyapaliana in his terrible rage as he fled the city to the northeast. Then was the Lord Hector, who it is said was the most piteous of them all. Racked with grief, he was cast out from the court of the Sky King, who named him interloper and betrayer, and had his honor stricken from the records of the House of Apollyon. As for the Lord Ogier, his fate was a mystery. He disappeared on the night of the Transfiguration and was never seen in Europe again. In the wake of this great sorrow, Cyrus IX delved even deeper into madness. For many years he lusted over the recognition offered by the population towards the famed knights that his father had allowed, and was loath to replace them. Instead, he abandoned the title of Sky King, thereafter being called Von Apollyon the Most High, and decreed that he alone would serve as the sword and shield of all Europe as its divine sovereign. The imperial cult was, unsurprisingly, eager to fall in line. However, the realm quickly fell to chaos. The Shatterchrist, loyal only to their Lord Knight, abandoned Hyapaliana to follow the demon Lancelot into the northeast. The king's standing army all but dissolved, its generals and lieutenants fracturing and seizing territory for themselves. Provinces in the east abandoned their loyalties, and many near the capital in the west attempted to flee the continent altogether. Throughout it all, Cyrus became even more reclusive and obsessed with his own self-proclaimed divinity, and his legions of inquisitors began building great altars to their god, whereupon ritualistic sacrifices were held, first of beasts, and then of men. Then came the profanities, ancient horrors that walked the earth eons before the first stone was laid in Asem's golden city. There first came upon the continent a dreadful storm of ice and frozen rain, and a cold that could freeze the blood of a man within his own body. This was the Venuvinex, the profane restrictor, who appeared beyond the walls of Hyapaliana as a horrid specter of creeping death. Any who approached the Venuvinex became chilled until the last of their life's warmth left them, and in its wake was a winter without end. For many grim months did the peoples of that city suffer and die, trapped behind the meager protection of the city walls. And yet the god of Apollyon did not stir to aid his countrymen. Not until the king's own daughter, the Princess Saria, felt the touch of the Venuvinex. Her body trembled until no strength remained, and then she too was still. In that moment, it was said that Cyrus came out of his high citadel as if he were a bolt of lightning. Those who remained to witness it said the heat of his rage set the very clouds in the sky alight, and that when he brought the spears of his father through the Venuvinex and into the ground, the earth beneath him cracked and splintered, and the two of them fell into that boiling red wound. It was within that chasm that Cyrus sealed away the Venuvinex. However, this tale was a lie. I, like many other, had sought shelter within the walls of the city to fend off the terrible cold, and with mine own eyes did I see a figure carrying a flaming hammer depart from Hyapaliana to do battle against the Venuvinex, all while the royal estate remained sealed. The name of this champion I never learned, but I know this for certain. It was not the Sky King. It was a woman, long and lean, with a hammer in one hand and a crested shield in the other. She wore no protection against the cold save a simple woolen cloak. Through the dark I saw not her eyes, but her hair was as radiant as the sun, orange and yellow and red. She noticed me as she passed, We acknowledged each other, and then she disappeared from history. Where she lies buried, I cannot say. But when Saurus awoke to find the Venuvinex slain, he quickly assured his people that it was their divine god king who had delivered them from the profane restrictor, and any chance at learning who she had been vanished with the freezing winds. In time, word spread of another great profanity that had emerged in the east. In whispered tones, people spoke about a great insect, a horrible crawling thing with fluttering wings and impenetrable skin. In the tongue of the Eastermen, this creature was called the Lamanilant, the profane adamant. A single survivor from the town of Room was said to have imparted a tale of considerable woe. The Lamanilant had descended from the sky, consumed every man, woman, and child, and then retreated before the sun had risen the next day. No sword would cut its hide. No spear could pierce its flesh. It was undeterred by fire or water or any of the tools of nature. It was said to even fall from great heights and feel no shock from the impact. But with the story of the Lamanilant came another, one that those who had witnessed the transformation of the Great Terror found all too convincing. Whether by miscommunication or an error in translation, a tale of the demon Lancelot finding and battling the profane adamant in the mountains of Chimeria was retold as the demon becoming the Lamanilant. It was said that this horrible insectoid form was the final stage of his terrible transfiguration, and so from then afterwards the name Lancelot was spoken interchangeably with that of the great insect. The last of the profanities emerged on the final night of the reign of King Saurus IX of Apollyon. The King of Europe, maddened by loss and the rapid decline of his authority, sought to raise another army to begin a final campaign of annihilation against the Fae, who he viewed as the source of his humiliation. He recalled all of his soldiers to High Apollyana, though few would answer his summons. His commanders had long since abandoned him, weak as he had become, but there were still those whose necks were not yet free of the Sky King's boot. On the night of his ruin, his shambling army of 8,000 men was to depart the city for the coast, leaving High Apollyana nearly empty. It was from a great distance that I saw what came next. The fall of the House of Apollyon took place at dusk, on the final night of autumn. A soft rain had passed over the lands of the Sky King throughout much of the day, and there was a haze. We first heard the rumbling as the sun began to set. My friend, the Primera, feared it was an earthquake. Then we heard a sound I will never forget. Like a droplet of water fallen from a great height, but loud and deep, very deep. A great rolling sound that swept across the plains between the city and the steppe where the convent sat. Through the haze, we saw very little, but we could hear distant sounds, the earth breaking, screams, stone and mortar being reduced to little more than dust. Just before sundown, I had retired to the washroom to prepare for my rest. We had anticipated journeying to the capital on the next morning to survey what had occurred. By the mirror in my chamber, I did see in the reflection a break in the haze, and the capital illuminated by the setting sun. What I saw in that instant was a horror unlike any I had ever known, or would ever know throughout my entire life. The thing that emerged from beneath the earth to swallow the House of Apollyon was not a creature made by Gaia. It was not a creature that would have found patronage by any god of the heavens or earth. It was an abnormality, something that should not be. A creature whose very essence was inimical to all living things. It was colossal, and beneath the weight of its horrible radiance, the entire city was being pulled into the dark below. But the mere sight of this terror, through the haze and in a reflection, caused my body to convulse. I was blinded instantly, and knew in that instant that many years had been taken from my life. For long hours I lingered on the brink of death, shuddering and shaking as the grim essence of this thing I had seen ran its course through me. In time I was found and brought to see a minister, where I managed to make a recovery after some months. I learned then that my friend the Primera had seen the horror directly, from our perch on the edge of the convent's tallest tower. While I no longer had eyes to see her with, the description from the curator was almost too tragic to speak of. Her blood had boiled in her veins and then hardened. Her mind had gone soft and leaked out through her open mouth, and her face had collapsed back into her vacant skull, which all now had the consistency of a soft cheese. Oh, what horrors we suffered. What horrors we had yet to suffer. Obviously, not all of this is explicitly relevant to understanding SCP-6765, but instead helps continue to build the overall canon of this time period. We'll get to an explanation of the relevant bits at the end of the document, but there's certainly some very interesting tidbits here. Some that fills in some gaps and some that creates new ones. Needless to say, the period of time after the Sky Kings ravaged the fairies was not great for practically anyone, and brought about the end of an era. With the lore dump over, in the next part we can continue to explore SCP-6765, which still has some secrets left to it, even if they shouldn't be uncovered.